Welcome to the Geekly. My name is Jules.
I'm Lex. Today we're talking about the Twilight Zone, Black Mirror, Swamp Thing, and all of the first season of Good Omens.
Yeah, I mean, first, I would just briefly, if you'll indulge me, I'd like to quickly talk about the finale of Doom Patrol. Because I've been kind of dwelling on it a bit this week. You know, we've had these 13 episodes of navel gazing, like you called it perfectly correctly. It was a good term to use. I've been thinking about what would have actually happened if we had got what we wanted. Mr. Nobody versus the Doom Patrol. I feel like this season they've found themselves as people, but they haven't found themselves as superheroes. I was actually thinking about what powers they possess at this after one season. Negative Man's probably the most kind of powerful, but we don't really know what his boundaries are. Jane has an amalgamation of, you know, she's got, is it 40 something or 60?
64.
64 personalities, each with a superpower. So much untapped potential there. Robot Man is just a Robot Man.
Yeah.
he can rip a Nazi in half, fair enough. Rita, you know, she could be as powerful as like a Green Lantern, you know, making all sorts of shapes and weapons. But I kind of wonder if they had actually ended up fighting Mr. Nobody. I think they... They could have all been killed, like, almost instantaneously with some kind of giant robot.
I don't think Mr. Nobody would kill them, but they would definitely lose the fight.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, he seems to have this weird sort of investment in them becoming a superhero team. I think I probably would have preferred them fighting and losing to what we got.
Yeah, I think if they fought and lost, they would have lost their lives. So I think my idea, or my kind of thoughts, is that it's probably best they kept their powder dry. Maybe they need to have next season where they're not developing as people, but they're actually developing powers.
Okay, I mean, like that would be fair enough, except for the fact that they literally wrote into the script that we now had a superhero team who was going to do superhero things, and
they didn't.
So if they hadn't had that little bit in there, I probably would have been like quite happy to go along with what they provided. But it's that kind of case of foreshadowing something and not delivering.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Right, that was it. That's what I'd like to get off my chest. Let's move on to Black Mirror. We just saw episode 1. Was it called Striking Vipers?
Yes, Striking Vipers.
I mean,
it's literally the most boring episode of anything I have ever seen.
Really?
Yes.
I thought it was really good. I'm glad we've got a difference of opinion on this. A heterosexual guy in a marriage having an extramarital affair with another heterosexual guy through the guise of like computer game characters, like computer game avatars. They tried to kiss in real life. It didn't take. So this chemistry they have was purely based in the computer game. That's the most kind of 21st century, maybe even 31st century, 21st century idea on extramarital affairs I've ever seen. I thought it was quite interesting, actually. I just liked what they did with it.
I mean, the concept is interesting, but nothing happened. There is no real story. Like, we're just watching a series of events, and it didn't really go anywhere. I was literally watching it thinking, like, when is this going to be over? It was so uneventful. It was incredibly slow paced. It was basically mostly scenes of the two video game characters fucking.
There was a lot of that. It was like a kind of Tekken Street Fighter hybrid.
It was all surface level stuff. Like, they didn't get into the emotional quotient about it. They completely skipped over him talking to his wife about what had been going on, and just sort of like in the last scene delivered us this thing where apparently they've come up with an arrangement on his birthday. He can go, have sex with his friend in the video game, and she can go pick up guys in the bar. So, I mean, like, the whole kind of conflict resolution aspect is totally absent from this episode. I mean, like, it's an interesting concept, it's an interesting base, but they didn't really explore any of the issues attached to it.
Yeah, you see, my interpretation of the resolution, I thought they'd done quite like an adult kind of 21st century thing where she didn't sort of say, right, divorce, that's it. They just came to this kind of arrangement that would benefit both of them, where the present they would give each other on his birthday was she'd give him her ring and she'd give him the kind of the virtual reality thing, which was great. I'd love that to be real, and he would give her like the wedding ring, as that was their little arrangement. And I thought it was kind of they'd been arrested, the two guys, she'd bailed him out, and they didn't have this conversation, and we didn't get to see the conversation. But I liked the way they dealt with it. I thought they kind of, it's very easy to say that's it, we're done. Obviously they've got two kids, there is love between them, but like that he I think they said it was like 11, they've been together like 11 years, and it was like kind of this 11-year itch kind of idea rather than the 7-year itch. I like that kind of the way they dealt with it.
Like, the wife's character, Theo, like, I mean, she was essentially, like many female characters are, just a prop in the male story. And by, like, skipping over the conversation they had, it robbed her of even more potential development as a character. Rather than seeing, like, why she decided to kind of go and agree to this, it was basically all about what he wanted. And, I mean, the interactions they did have, they portrayed her very much as sort of the clingy, potentially jealous wife who suspects her husband of having an affair. And, I mean, really, the story itself wasn't anything innovative or new. You know, a guy cheats on his wife. There are a million stories about guys cheating on their wives, and this wasn't really dealt with in any particularly interesting way.
What did you think about, obviously, Black Mirror is kind of about the technology side. What did you make of the actual technology?
I mean, the technology is cool.
Can you imagine playing, like, Skyrim or something with, like, that kind of... Obviously, the VR kind of goggles are becoming more and more mainstream, but a little chip, like a little thing you plug on the side of your temple, it's like goes straight to your brain.
It's cool. I would love to have that sort of technology.
I'd probably never leave.
It's a little bit disturbing. That,
very disturbing.
The way they looked, like, when they were activated, I mean, they were just kind of, like, comatose.
Yeah, like, their eyes had, like, kind of frosted over. If that technology ever existed, connect some IVs up to me, just let me kind of... play a month of Skyrim, occasionally look in to check I haven't, like, swallowed my own tongue or something. But yeah, I really like that. I was surprised by how we've kind of disagreed on the kind of the story and the ending, but I was surprised by how hopeful the ending would be. I thought he kind of deserved to be like, what do you mean, like, that's what you're doing? We're obviously done. But again, I kind of like the way they dealt with it.
I think for me it was just sort of like, none of the characters were really kind of fully dimensional. They were all very flat, and you didn't really get a lot about who they were. I mean, we knew that Carl worked in the music industry. They'd been roommates at one point in time. And these people could have been anybody, and not in kind of a universal way, just in a kind of very generic, boring way.
Taking that idea a little bit further, I mean, as you said, that these could be, could be any couple. Could this be preaching the idea that divorce isn't always the way, and you have to maybe work through your issues? Or am I really kind of trying to dig something out here?
I think you could probably assign, like...
If that was
I think you could probably project a wide range of meanings onto this episode. I don't necessarily know that the writers deliberately put those meanings in there. I mean, it could be promoting the idea of, sort of the unconventional family, and, like, where it's becoming more and more mainstream to kind of step outside the conventional heteronormative married couple and welcome in kind of alternative lifestyles. But again, like, they didn't really deal with that issues. Like, they didn't talk or discuss polyamory. They didn't even really go into the conflict of two heterosexual guys having a sexual relationship with each other. Even though it was only relegated to the game, like, it didn't work in person. But I mean, there was still a bit of romantic aspect to it. And Carl at one point said that he loved Danny. I mean, it could have been really, really interesting if they'd really kind of delved into constructs around sexuality and gender identity and relationships outside the heteronormative model, but they didn't do any of that. It was essentially almost like softcore porn.
Yeah.
I mean, if that's what you're into, good for you, but I like a little bit more story with my sex scenes.
I largely agree with you. I think they could have done more. I think at the same time, I feel like a lot could have been left out that they kept in. They probably maybe put the focus in the wrong piece at the wrong time. When people like Sophie Turner say, like, I'm really interested in somebody's soul. Not I don't see gender. You either have that connection with somebody's soul or you don't. That's what I'm into. When I hear that, I kind of don't really understand what she means. I see gender, like, personally. But when I watched this, that's what it made me think. It made me think that there was some kind of connection between these two guys, but on a kind of deeper level that wasn't really to do with their gender. And so when they're in the game, they kind of had this connection, but in real life, it didn't work so much. But I really enjoyed it. But I think, you're right. I think they maybe could have put some focus on some of the bigger elements. You're right. It's a lot about kind of the non-traditional family.
For me, I can totally get I'm attracted to somebody's soul rather than their gender. For me, I was watching this and I was kind of hoping that they would actually say something meaningful about gender and sexuality, and it seems like they just kind of used it to appear current and topical rather than really being aware of the issues that surround both subjects. So yeah, I found it disappointing and a bit boring. Alright, well, I mean, we compare Twilight Zone and Black Mirror to each other a lot, so let's talk about this week's episode of the Twilight Zone. I was watching this and was just like, yes, this is the kind of content I want from the Twilight Zone. Up until we got to Jordan Peele's end speech, and then it was like they just could not resist spelling everything out for the audience. And like, I mean, it would be awesome if anybody associated with the Twilight Zone listened to our show. If you do, trust your reader to figure shit out. We're not idiots.
I like this probably more than about 90% of the episode this season. You could tell what the social issues were, you could tell what they were trying to say, but it kind of suffered from Three Stooges syndrome, as Mr. Burns would say. It could be read in several different ways, and all the issues were trying to get through the doorway at the same time and kind of cancel each other out. So you weren't kind of bludgeoned over the head with anything in particular. The idea that people value guns more than they do lives. I like the idea also that destiny isn't necessarily written, because at one point you're watching this thinking, oh, he's going to kill the new love interest. Oh, he's going to kill the lawyer. Oh no, just resist, and then he doesn't even pull the trigger, but he ends up killing this like low-level thug. And instead of the assumption this kind of guy's going to be the villain of the piece by just falling down the hole, he ends up becoming the hero. Again, it's one of those things only in America. A guy's dead, like a life was taken, and yet this guy's the hero. It always bothers me about that kind of thing. And also the fact that the name Jeff was on the bullet, and he met so many Jeffs, and it's the idea that it doesn't really matter what the name is, but any bullet at any time can get someone and kill someone. Yeah, a lot of kind of ways it can be read, and like I said, they kind of all cancel each other out rather than being like suffering concussion this week. I feel like I've got some light bruising. So
I enjoyed the fact that until the last few minutes, nothing was really spelled out for us, and you could kind of pick and choose what you wanted to take from it. Like, there's a little bit of commentary on predestination, and I mean the fact that only Jeff could see the name written on the bullet kind of brings up the idea of a self-fulfilling prophecy. Then there's sort of the responsibility of gun ownership and how possessing power can sort of twist you a little bit, because like as he said, his father was kind of like a quintessential hippie. He hated guns, and yet he coveted this very like special blue Scorpion gun. And the main Jeff,
call him Jeff Prime,
he wasn't particularly into guns, and he wanted to get rid of it, and then he even needed the money that the gun would have brought in.
And the guy kept calling him, saying like, it would be more, just give me this gun, we'll get you like a king's ransom for this gun.
And then it got to be almost kind of like a Gollum thing. It was like, you sort of saw him sort of deteriorate, and like as you said, when we kept meeting Jeff after Jeff after Jeff, and thinking like, oh no, it's gonna be this guy, it's gonna be this guy, no, it's gonna be this one.
And he started carrying it around like in his bag. And one time he tries to like get it out and he can't.
And at the lawyers meeting, and the gun is in the backpack, and you're just waiting for him to like pull it out and shoot somebody. And so I mean, like, there's a lot of tension, a lot of build-up.
I mean, there was tension throughout. Like, I was gripped throughout. It was, and I haven't really felt that way since probably the airplane episode 2. I like. And I mean, Chris O'Dowd, who I traditionally associate with like comedic roles.
He's an incredibly versatile actor. Like, I mean, he kills it when it comes to comedic roles. He's able to do serious roles in this very, like, I mean, I think Chris O'Dowd really enhanced the character. Absolutely. Because he has this sort of endearing, unassuming quality to him, and so you automatically start rooting for him, and then you watch him sort of deteriorate, and you're just thinking, oh man,
you can look at him as kind of like, the way he looks, the way he talks, the way he acts, as kind of a life's loser sometimes. And in the IT crowd, for instance, he was portrayed as kind of a loser, and so to be on the receiving end of all these kind of knocks through life wasn't unbelievable, and a lot of people could probably relate to that kind of person and that role in life. I like the fact that we had a kind of strong supernatural element this week. They've tried in some other episodes, but we haven't really had that. This gun would fire itself. It would almost respond to what he was saying.
It would also like escape the safe.
Yeah.
At one point, because it was afraid of the dark.
Yes, he needed to carry this little torchlight with it every time it was in his bag, which was just delicious. And obviously, the bullets had the names would kind of appear on the bullets. It got the hopeful ending, and I was kind of glad that it did. But like you said,
didn't really get.
I was going to say the hopeful ending for him, but like you said, he threw it into the water. He could have sold it. He kind of went away, the hero, happy with the divorce, happy with life, and then those kids picked it up, and one of the kid who didn't find the gun found the bullet, and the bullet had his name on it. So that was, and then Jordan Peele obviously kind of
summed everything up for us. I really enjoyed it. I also I appreciated the fact that they didn't try to explain the gun.
Yeah,
it just was.
We don't need answers. People, let us dwell on things. Let us talk about it on Reddit and chat rooms and whatever.
That's the fun of shows like this is thinking about the possibilities and imagining different outcomes and theories and trying to kind of unpick it all. And I think the major way that the Twilight Zone has been failing is that they they have to underscore every theme and message they're trying to do, and it's like that. It's really not necessary.
Yeah, I like that they talked briefly about anthropomorphization, and that's the idea of us like attributing like characteristics on things, because I constantly do that throughout my life. You know, everything, and like people, you know, the car, like, oh come on, like, you know, think they're talking, and that exists. I mean, a lot of people I know with OCD kind of have that, but I think it's something that's just so commonplace these days. You know, we talk to ourselves, we talk to bits of furniture or whatever,
and especially now that we have technology that talks back to us. I mean, it's like, I mean, I assign human characteristics to my little robot all the time, and I mean, he's kind of the most unsophisticated robot there is. Mostly he just beeps and
it's
gets
like
lost in
Tamagotchi with wheels, really.
Yeah, he's like one of my pets.
Yeah, you can kind of understand watching this how, you know, it's not the same in England really, but you can understand how guns kind of talk to people in, you know, other countries, and people kind of feel this bond with them, and to give a gun up would be to lose a friend, you know. So yeah, a lot to think about. Nothing overwhelmed any of the other things. Everything was kind of balanced, and they all got wedged in the door like that episode of The Simpsons, and yeah, I think it worked.
Yeah,
probably, you know, certainly top 4 of the season, maybe top 3 of the season.
I would rank this episode pretty high up.
Yeah,
I mean, it's definitely one of the better episodes.
And word on the street is next episode 10, which we had a little trailer for at the end. It's really fucking good. So yeah,
I'm really interested in next week's episode.
It's like the first 2 in the season will be strong, the last 2 in the season will be strong. Should we move on to Good Omens?
So yeah, I first read Good Omens when I was 14 or 15, and it was one of those novels that, of course, watching this, it wasn't like 100% accurate in terms of like what happened in the book, but it did replicate the atmosphere and tone and feeling of the book a lot. It had that sort of...
I haven't read the book, but it's nice. You probably like the fact that it was... The script was written by Neil Gaiman as well. It's always nice to have that connective tissue.
Pretty much all of the main parts are my favourite actors.
It might be the greatest cast ever assembled on TV.
They all did it perfectly. I didn't like look at a single one of them and think like, oh, that's not Aziraphale or that's not Crowley. I mean, Michael Sheen and David Tennant particularly, definitely the stars of the show. The kids were less interesting. They just seemed too sweet and perfect and artificial, and like every time the kids came on, I was just like, oh no.
I enjoyed this, but I think, you know, if I could rename this, I would call it like a quaint little British apocalypse. And if you're listening to that and it really appeals to you, this show will really appeal to you. You might think it sounds charming, and you'd be completely correct. If that doesn't appeal to you, you'll probably kind of hate this, because at moments when the show kind of thought it was exciting, I found it quite boring, and it was quite uneventful. I found kind of throughout. It reminded me of a show that was on about 5 years ago called You, Me and the Apocalypse as well, which was another quaint little British apocalypse. And every time Tennant and Sheen were on screen, it was just gold. It was absolutely perfect. You know, when Crowley was dealing with people in hell, Aziraphale was dealing with the people in heaven, great. But every time they weren't on the screen, my interest kind of dipped, to say the least. Jack Whitehall as like the Witchfinder, Michael McKean as another Witchfinder, the witch that they found. What was her name? It was a really good name.
Anathema Device.
And Anathema Device wasn't really as interested in that storyline. The kids, like you say...
I also thought that the end was a bit anticlimactic.
That's exactly what I've put as well, yeah. The kid kind of said, "You're not my father," to Satan, and that was it.
Yeah. and the defeating of the 4 horsemen, I mean, it was so quick and so...
Let's talk about those 2 scenes, actually. I think they're really kind of integral to the whole thing. There were 4 kids, and there were the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, and they were on motorbikes, which I thought was nice, and they didn't have pestilence, they had pollution, which I thought was beautiful.
The pestilence retired.
Yeah, which I thought was so perfect, considering, you know, literally the age we live in. And the 4 kids, using the sword, basically spoke to them, and that was enough to kind of vanquish them one by one. And that was just absolute bullshit. I was very unhappy with that.
This is very symbolic. You know, you have Adam and his 3 friends, and you have Death and the other three horsemen, because Death was kind of the leader of their little
bike gang.
Yeah, their biker gang. There were a number of scenes of the 4 kids playing make-believe, and they had like a little fort out in the woods, and just sort of going and having these very sweet, wholesome moments, and those scenes could have been used to foreshadow that these kids actually did have the power to conquer the 4 horsemen, because otherwise it was just these 4 random kids with no special powers or anything, just went up, said a few words, and...
It was literally as it sounds. They said words.
That was
it.
And
while holding a flaming sword.
While holding the flaming sword.
And they'd been kind of built up, the 4 horsemen. You know, this package delivery guy had basically done this call to arms. They'd over the previous 4 or 5 episodes, and they'd all, you know, come together for this one moment, and they were gone like that. they didn't do anything. There was no grandstanding. I mean, they killed a few people in like the main like army barracks room, wherever it was, where they were firing all the missiles from or something, and then they were just gone. And then when they were gone, Satan appeared, voiced by Benedict Cumberbatch. Wonderful. Kids like, "You're not my father," and he's gone. Basically, it was 6 episodes, an hour each, pretty much, and it took place, in country lanes, sleepy villages, an old bookshop. Was it some kind of chapel with nuns at one point as well? I found myself, when it was meant to be charming, I found it charming, but when it was meant to be kind of more exciting, ultimately kind of found it a little bit lacking. And so in the end, I found myself as kind of centrist. I don't know whether I like it or don't like it, and that probably means it didn't quite do it for me. But like I said, Tennant and Sheen just fucking superb. Amazing.
They're the two of them alone are worth watching it.
Absolutely, yeah. It made me want them to be in every scene. I think if they were, they were probably in like 60% of the scenes. If they'd been like in 80, it felt like it was about them, and it would have made the show a lot better.
It really, like, the book is.
I feel like it probably would have been.
Yeah, as I was watching, I was in the scenes with the kids, and every time the kids would come up, I was just thinking, like, we don't need this scene. No. Just give us more of Sheen and Tennant. That's what I want.
And the thing was that they were fleshed out. They were really 3-dimensional. We had this beautiful. It took half an hour to show us them meeting throughout history. All these times they were at the Garden of Eden together. They were in Rome together. They were, in all these amazing places. I think they were at the Bastille for the French Civil War, was it? And you just saw this amazing friendship that had developed over time. They weren't like, they didn't really like each other in the beginning. Now they're kind of frenemies, but they like. And so we had this great half an hour of literally, it was like, I think it was 26 minutes, and then we had the opening sequence, the opening kind of credit sequence, and they were just built and 3-dimensional and wonderful, and everything about them was great. But then you have the kids who were as 1-dimensional and odd. You couldn't believe how kind of ill-fitting they were with the show. The two Witchfinders, it's probably the best thing I've ever seen Jack Whitehall do, but again, he was just 1-dimensional. Anathema, again, we got a little bit of her family heritage, nothing really that kind of drew me to her. Just give me more of the main two, and I would have liked it a lot more, I would say.
Overall, I'm pretty pleased with this adaptation.
How do you feel about the fact that I always haven't read the book? That might be the entire book. Is it the entire book? Is there anything? Yeah. Neil Gaiman has said there won't be a series 2, and Anathema got this package saying the further predictions and nice and
accurate predictions of Agnes Nutter,
and obviously I thought, okay, well, there's series 2. It's been kind of hand delivered to us, but she threw it in the fire, so she wants to now live her own life rather than living kind of by predictions. I like the idea that, because I've got this belief that TV shows don't have to get a second series, the OA, amazing.
I still have not seen the second season.
Yeah, because that's the thing. The OA I thought was really good, and I was like, I don't know if I want a second season. Sometimes you get these kind of sleeper hits, and one season's planned, and then the person will be like, oh shit, this did really well, right, what am I going to do for season 2? And sometimes you've told all your story, and that's okay, move on to a different show. So that's kind of how I feel. I like the way this rounded out. Anticlimactic ending, yeah, but maybe there doesn't need to be a further story, and so that's quite an interesting thing in the modern day, would you say?
Personally, I'm glad that it's just kind of a self-contained season of 6 episodes, because when I compare it to American Gods, which is in a second season and potentially a third season, the first season covered 95% of the book. It was really good. It was really engaging. It was fun to watch all these characters I'd imagined come to life. Some things had been switched around and modernized and put in different orders. And then we got to the second season. Because I don't believe that Neil Gaiman's involved with the writing of American Gods at all. And the second season felt like it was trying to do the same things as the first season, but it didn't actually know how to do that. It was very obvious that the content of these episodes is not in the books, that they're kind of making up brand new stuff now. A lot of it seems very chaotic and random and kind of weird effects for the sake of having weird effects without a lot of purpose. And I have to admit, my enjoyment of it is, now I watch the episodes and I can go whole episodes and be like, I have no idea what I just saw.
Yeah. I watched, I got halfway through season 1 of American Gods, and I like style. I'll often talk about how nice something looks, particularly on Netflix or Amazon Prime. It felt like entirely style over substance when I watched it. I haven't read the book.
American Gods has definitely become style over substance. Yeah. It's more about flashy, cool images than us telling an actual story.
Yeah, is that Mr. Wednesday? Is that his name?
That is Mr. Wednesday. Yeah. I have the Mr. Wednesday Funko Pop among a small collection of Funko Pops.
Should we move on to Swamp Thing? We've watched one episode. We've watched the pilot. And the pilot, when a pilot comes out, you think, okay, it could be the best one because this is the one they've hoarded themselves out to sell it to TV. That's one red flag. If the pilot is called Pilot, that's 2 red flags. This could be the best episode of the season, but god damn it.
It is a good episode.
If this is the sign of things to come, this could be very special. This was really a visual treat. I thought I really liked everything about this, I have to be honest. It's DC Universe, you know, we're right straight at the back of Titans was Doom Patrol, straight at the back of Doom Patrol is this. It looks and sounds amazing.
I'm so impressed with the content coming out of the DC streaming universe. I mean, these shows are just great. Nothing is done half-assed. I mean, except for Cyborg, but we've discussed that. But, you know, like, watching it feels like a cinematic experience.
Absolutely.
It doesn't feel like you're just watching a TV show.
I mean, if you think about watching the Arrowverse, also DC, you think about watching this, it's chalk and cheese, isn't it?
Yeah, it's totally like, you know, the Arrowverse is kind of like the kid version, and this is the adult version. Yeah. You know, I don't really know that much about Swamp. So going into the show, like, everything was brand new. I have no idea how close it is to the comics or how far away. Compared to most of the other shows we watched, we were just sitting there, and it was just going along with the experience, and it wasn't really sort of picking things apart. I was just like completely following the characters and what was going on, had no sort of insight into what was going to happen next. Didn't really care if I knew what was going to happen next. I was just quite happy to go on the journey with them.
I just felt immersed when I was watching. I felt like I was there, really enjoyed it. Long-time fans of this show might be familiar with a question I occasionally pose to Lex. I pose this question most of the time when we're watching things like American Horror, and I will say to you, Lex, is this horror? And 9 times out of 10 you will say
no. But
I'm going to ask you today, Lex.
Okay.
Is this horror?
Yes.
I mean... Oh.
And it is the best kind of horror.
Oh.
Swamp Thing really, really calls back to the roots of horror in the Gothic tradition, and it does it so well. Like, it's so subtle, it's so nuanced. You just kind of have this sort of constant, creepy, unease feeling. It doesn't rely on jump scares or, you know, even really visible monsters, because, I mean, for most of this episode, the threat is, you know, various vines tangling, and you don't really see the source of them. And, I mean, like, we both thought after the first scene that Swamp Thing was in existence, and they were kind of going to discover Swamp Thing. Turns out that the scientist becomes Swamp Thing, who looks awesome as well.
I've never been to America, sadly. I know that, you know, this is set in Louisiana. There's a lot of emphasis on the swamp. They have this town hall meeting at one point. I don't know if it's the mayor or something. He's saying the swamp is like good for this town, but at the same time, the swamp took my dad. But it's the idea that this swamp, they coexist with this swamp. And there's this idea that people have been dumping, like, growth hormones or something for artificial growth of the wildlife around the swamp, and people talk about these kids are getting sick, and it's the idea that the swamp is fighting back. And so the main character, whose surname is Arcane, which I thought was really interesting, she's part of like the CDC. She's brought in to like find this cure.
I mean, it's worth noting that she's played by Crystal Reed, who is she's making quite a name for herself in like the kind of supernatural superhero things. I mean, she started off on Teen Wolf. You know, she had a great run on Gotham.
Sophia Falcone
popped up in a few other places, and I mean, when her name popped up on the screen, I just thought, yes.
She was great, and she's come to like investigate what's happening, why these people are getting sick, and the kind of the idea that the swamp is fighting back is what the locals are telling her.
Well, and she is a local, because there's a little bit of...
She's coming back home,
she's coming back home, and there's some darkness in her past.
She was one of the people that's been kind of taken over by the kind of fauna, the vines. She was doing this post-mortem, she's taken aside, and when the stuff started to grow out of him, I mean, that was terrifying. That was so well done. It was the budgets on this feel high, and it was terrifying. And she was probably like screaming, and they had to get away from this thing that was just growing. Just beautiful. And when the guys were in the boat dropping stuff, I thought they were like fishing or something with like dynamite, and the vines like took the boat. Oh, just so good. It's difficult to, you know, comment on things after just seeing one episode, but god damn it, I'm excited for the future. This feels high budget. It looks and sounds amazing. It's horror. You know, there's definitely a gap in my television watching at the moment for horror. I want more.
That's it for this week. We are all planning on doing another watch-along for our patrons. You can get access to this for as little as $1 a month. It's totally worth it. The next one we're going to do is Shaun of the Dead, which should be out this weekend at some point.
Which is going to be great. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of my favourite films, so...
Yeah, and we'll be doing, I think, Jessica Jones. It's maybe not next week, but the week after, season 3.
Follow us on Twitter, @GeekNerdPod. We're on Facebook, /The Geekly. If you want to check out our Patreon, it's patreon.com/Geek Nerd.
We're actually on YouTube as well these days.
Yeah, we're on YouTube.
Yeah, so just type in The Geekly, and I think we're about like the 5th thing down at the moment.
That's pretty good.
Yeah,
so we're trying out this YouTube thing.
This newfangled YouTube thing. All the kids are talking about.
So check it out there. If you like what we're doing on YouTube, you know, drop us a comment. We're always happy to get reviews on iTunes.
Some would say thrilled. Oh, well, you know what? I actually went to Blue Water yesterday. I should probably talk about this. They had big statues.
I saw the pictures on Twitter. Like, it looked amazing.
There were 10 of them. I found them all. The only one I didn't bother taking a picture of was Spider-Man. I'm a bit blur on Spider-Man, but the one that was amazing was they had a life-size Thanos. It was the first one I saw. Didn't know they were even doing this thing, and I just walked right up to him, just looming over me. And yeah, it was they've got a really good cinema there. They've got an IMAX there, which would be good to remember actually for the future. And they get these big statues in for all the superhero ones, and it was there for the Infinity War one. And you know, they're the one from Ant-Man and the Wasp. They had the BVS, Batman and Superman and Wonder Woman. And yeah, it was this little treasure hunt for kids to go around, and I was taking photos with all of them. I was like, get the fuck out of my way, kids. It was really cool. I was annoyed because the Hulk one, I was on like the second level. The Hulk one was way down on the first. I could see him in the distance. I thought, he looks really small. That can't be a good size. And these two people walked along and they looked like ants compared to him.
Oh, and over on my Twitter, which is at Lexicality with K's, I'm doing every week, my mom is reviewing one of the MCU films. We've gotten through phase 1 at this point. So far, The Avengers is her favorite.
I think we need to get like a one line, and we need to drop in the podcast every week. Like a one liner for each film. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that's been pretty fun. It's the pinned tweet on my Twitter account, so go check that out.